Hello and welcome to the Fit News Podcast. I am your host, Jen Shaver, and joining me today is Kate Champion, author, therapist, and constantly curious human who has 2 decades of lived experience helping, supporting, and inspiring people to craft healthy, heart-centered lives. Also a hiker and backpacker with a strong connection to the natural world, Kate is committed to personal growth and staying active and healthy for the long haul. Kate is the author of best-selling books such as Never Too Late, Inspiration, Motivation, and Sage Advice from 7 later in life athletes, and also You Are Limitless, Anxiety, Grief, Trauma, Addiction, 7 inspiring stories of hope and healing, and 2 pocket guides. Kate has spoken nationally and internationally about leadership, addiction, anxiety, wellness, and recovery. She has lived experience with grief, loss, trauma, and healing. Through her books, clinical practice, online communities, and her weekly podcast, Living Big Mindfully, Kate has been serving and supporting people for over 2 decades. Kate, I'm so excited to have the chance to chat with you. And the funny thing is, it was in our pre-planning meeting, right, that we discovered we could have actually done this in person because your office is about 10 minutes from me.
That's right. That's right. So, hi, Jen. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, it was we do this a lot, right? And it's rare that you get somebody that's literally in your backyard.
Yeah,
So, super, super nice to connect today. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Why don't we get started with maybe your story and how you came to do what you are doing now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to kind of give you the Cliff Notes version,
Yeah.
otherwise we could be here forever, right? But kind of grew up in England and just I joke and say it was a challenging first quarter, like kind of birth to 25, lots of grief, lost trauma changes and stuff like that. But then, moved from the UK, traveled around Europe a bit, lived in the Canary Islands for a year, and then came to the United States. So it's really where I feel like my growth journey started. Lived in California on the West Coast for a while, and just really, I'm a late bloomer. I do everything late, so I didn't actually go back to school until my late 20s, and I decided to get into psychology, and then kind of gone up from there. So I've done everything late. I'm definitely a late bloomer. Like I said, went to school late, got married late, had kids late, you know,
Well,
started
I mean,
backpacking at
that's
55.
is that only because that society has this quote unquote timeline, right? You were right on time for you and your life
For
and for
me,
your circumstances, right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely. It worked. It couldn't have happened at a different time,
Hmm.
And then, fast forward, I'm 60 and, started backpacking at 55, wrote my first book around that time and, started a podcast at 60. So I really just feel like, that's what all my work is about. You are never too late. You are limitless, right? They really encompass some of the philosophies in life, right? I don't
Hmm.
think it isn't too late in general,
Right.
overall. And we are really limitless, right? When we put our minds to something, we can achieve so much.
Hmm. Right, right. Why don't we talk a little bit more about the ideal of emotional fitness and what does that mean and how can we as individuals monitor that and take control of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my practice, in my clinical head, I work a lot with grief, loss, and anxiety,
Mhm.
and I'm also help a lot with people with wellness and recovery, right? So it's not
Mhm.
just the difficult stuff, but it's moving towards the better stuff. And I think that, this concept of emotional fitness has really been kind of lost, right? In culture and media, we focus on food, we focus on, going to the gym, out there running, right? We focus on all this external
Right.
stuff. I think often we miss the internal piece. And frankly, I was laughing with a friend the other day. You can run a ton of miles, you can go to the gym every day of the week, you can eat a bucket of kale a day. And if you're not healed or awareness, you don't have self-awareness on the inside, if you're not in charge of your own everyday kind of thoughts and feelings, then you're really not awake, right? You're really not living life.
Right. Right. And so what are some ways that, we can kind of, see where do we fit in terms, where is our emotional fitness, right? And then what can we do to improve it?
Yeah, another great question. So the biggest thing is really self-awareness. So it's really
Mhm,
developing self-awareness. So that means, are you really aware of what your thoughts are telling you? Are
mhm,
you really aware of your, we all have them, right? Those crappy kind of limiting beliefs that tell us, oh, I can't go for a run today, or I'm so slow, or I could never do that, or right? Are we aware that those are just stories? They're not truths, they're not realities.
right,
So it's doing that kind of work to really putting all that stuff in the spotlight and bringing often the unconscious conscious, right? We really have
right,
to dig in and learn about that. So that's the first step. And I make it sound easy, but it's not. It's
right,
definitely like work, but it's important,
right.
really important.
Yeah. Um, you talk about limiting beliefs, and I read a really great, I get a daily email. It's called Daily Discipline. And it really
Mm,
talks about what you just mentioned. And so I just pulled it up because I want to go through it a little with you because I think you will really like it. Um,
yeah,
it says, you know that better discipline will deliver better results for you. Deep down, you don't doubt that. But when you hesitate to embrace discipline fully, it's not because you doubt discipline, it's because you doubt yourself. And so that goes to the limiting beliefs, right?
absolutely.
In terms,
Yes,
yeah.
right. Sometimes we have these, those limiting beliefs often fall into a couple of buckets. So one is like a scarcity, right? We don't
Mhm,
have enough. Another one is that worthy. Are we worthy? Are we
mhm.
worthy? Do we really value ourselves? And the other one is often kind of just fear, right? Fear of trying, fear of failure.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of buckets that we often find, those beliefs kind of fall into ultimately.
Right, right. And I think a lot of times that fear of failure is what does hold us back from, stepping out and, pushing ourselves, if you will, right, to whatever it is. Maybe it's go after, that promotion or, start your wellness journey, right? Because, oh, I've tried it in the past and it didn't work. So why should I start that again, right?
Yeah. Or even as you're talking, even fear of what other people think, right? Fear of judgment.
Yeah.
I was working with the other day and she was literally said, we were trying to get her on a schedule to kind of get to the gym. And she literally said, I can only go to the gym certain times because she was older. She's 57, 58,
Hmm.
and she had fear of being judged for her age because of the air quotes younger people in the gym. So we really had to dig into that,
Right,
right? This
right.
fear of being judged, fear of what other people are going to think,
Hmm.
right? That's big for people, really
Right.
big for people.
Right, right. And there's also that fear of, when you are trying to get healthy and those around you are not maybe on that same path as well. And then the judgment that comes with having to, deal with that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, sometimes the closest people to us kind of can get a little bit threatened by
It,
change and growth
yes.
and getting healthier, and especially if you've been in a long-term kind of relationship or a partnership that can really unsettle things. But
Hmm.
truthfully, I think that's actually okay.
Hmm.
I think that, to shake things up a bit, to help, those systems get a little uncomfortable. I think
Yep.
there's growth from that. So I actually think that's an okay thing if that's
Hmm.
happening.
Right, right. Yeah. Now, I know you talk a lot about creating that never too late mindset, and it really is true. I mean, the only time it's too late is when you're 6 feet under. So, because a lot of people will say, oh, I'm 50, I'm too old to, lift weights, or I'm too old to start to, get healthy now. Why bother? Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah.
how
And
do
I
we
had,
answer that question? I mean, how do when somebody says why bother, what would you say to them?
I would say, why not bother? Why
Yep.
not bother?
Yeah.
Why not bother? Because you're not dead yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally again had this conversation the other day, and we were like, really, again, that is a limiting belief. And I said to that person, how did you learn that? How did you learn that it was too late? How did you learn that this message that you're too old? How did you learn that? And it stopped her in her tracks, and she was like, wow. And then she started going the story about her grandmother was really sickly, and you know around 50 she just really didn't get off the couch much, so she had a lot of this early childhood messaging around it's too old and we're weak and we're frail and blah blah blah. we
Yeah.
we we went sliced through all of that crap because that's just a story. That is
Yeah.
just a story. This truth. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So how did you
can
learn?
you imagine at 50 being just, exiled
No,
to the couch?
no, no, I can't. But
There's
look at
so
that
much life
generationally.
left to
So
live.
there is. Look at that generationally, though. This woman I was
Yeah.
working with was probably 55, 60. So
Hmm.
her grandmother, right? We're looking at her mother and then her grandmother, right? So if
Yeah.
we go back in history, times have changed a lot. Times have
Right.
changed.
Yeah.
50 and 60 today isn't what 50 or 60 was, 100 years ago,
Well, look at the Golden
So there's
Girls, right?
evolution. Yeah, there's an evolution.
Yeah.
And thank heavens, right? Thank
Oh,
heavens,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so important to understand that, you know, if you are on this side of the dirt, it is not too
Yeah,
late, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know,
And for whatever, right? And what are your
yeah,
dreams? What are your hopes? What do you
yeah,
see for yourself? It doesn't have to be, running the marathon or
right.
hiking Mount Kilimanjaro. I mean, it could be something about music. It could be something creative. I've always wanted to do pottery, or I've always wanted to fly a kite, or I've always,
Mhm.
wanted to visit the White Mountains or whatever, right? I mean, just
Right,
make a list, get intentional, and just work towards it. It's
right,
so important. Life isn't over until it's over.
right, right. Yeah. And it's so important to make the most and to be an active and not a passive participant in it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have more control. I mean, a lot of things are out of our control, but we have more
Right.
control than we realize. And again, it starts with the emotional fitness and the mindset and the thinking, right? It
Hmm.
starts with the thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, mindset is such a important piece to that puzzle. And if we can understand how we are talking to ourselves,
Yeah.
then, now, because that's really what our mind is hearing.
Hmm. It is. It
Yeah.
is. I'm sure listeners have heard, right? That phrase that says, would you talk to yourself like the mind talks to you? Or would you talk to your best friend like your internal dialogue talks to you? And often it's no, I would never say that to a friend. I would never say that to my sister. I'd never say that to another human. But yet we're saying it to ourselves,
Right.
like constantly on a loop over and over and over. It's brutal. It can
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know your book, Never Too Late, Inspiration, Motivation, and Sage Advice from 7 Later in Life Athletes. Um, could you maybe share just a few pieces of advice from that book?
Yeah, so that's the first book I
Mhm.
wrote, and the little backstory. That was a kind of a creative download from a backpacking 101 trip, and I think I was
Oh,
literally, it was my 55th birthday, and I did the overnight a women's 4-day trip, and
oh,
just was so
wow.
inspired. So one of the women that was the leader of the hike or the backpacking trip, we sat around a campfire one evening, and she was telling us, and she's in her 60s, right? She's in her 60s. She's a solo hiker. She's done all the major trails. She's an amazing woman. And we sat around the campfire that night, and she was telling us her story and her background and all the adventures. And she was telling us about her inspiration, which was kind of Grandma Gatewood. And so she was, I got home and, had the inspiration and started writing this book. And she was actually one of the people featured in there. And all of their messages, right, if I can sum it up, is all about, mindset, motivation, getting those daily habits,
Hmm.
and just really, really keeping going, keep moving, right? Keep
Right.
moving, even if it's small baby steps, even if it's a walk to the mailbox, even if you're starting from scratch and it's a walk to the mailbox, or it's a salad today, or it's an
Mhm.
extra glass of water, right? Just start small, but just keep moving.
Right.
The power of community came up a lot in the book, right? How important community is in connecting with
Yes.
like-minded others.
Hmm.
And I found that in my journey as well. So those are some of the tips and strategies and takeaways from some of
Yeah.
those athletes.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you mentioned small daily habits, right? Which, you and I both, share that message so often with our audiences because that truly is where the magic happens, in the small daily habits. And one of those small daily habits that is very important is making sure that our nervous system is healthy, right? Why is that so
Yeah,
important? So important?
yeah. Yeah. So nervous system health goes with emotional health, right? Emotional fitness. Because if we are fit emotionally, then we're just so much better at dealing with stress. And honestly, there's always going to be stress, right? There's always
Right.
going to be
Yep.
the bump in the road, the thing that goes wrong. Sometimes it's three or four things, right, coming at you, right? So if we can learn, right, to kind of see these stresses as just bumps in the road,
Hmm.
not get so hooked into the story about, oh my gosh, this is bad, and how am I going to cope? And oh my gosh, my world is falling apart. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to be able to do that. Or I'm always going to be right. All of that, all of the
Hmm.
things. If we can really begin to catch that and just kind of reframe that and just be kind of a little more present, a little more grounded, a little more centered, that starts with the breath, right? It starts with like
Right.
stopping, taking a breath, getting grounded.
Hmm.
Then our nervous systems, right, which controls so much in our body, can really begin to also kind of like take a breath, and they're not producing all the hormones and the cortisol and the adrenaline, which is so bad for us
Right.
chronically. And just it's a win-win. So the emotional fitness also ties into the nervous system health as well.
Hmm.
They're a team, they kind of go together. So
Yeah.
that's why they're both so important. So
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. And I think particularly, for the midlife woman who it does have a lot going on, right? She's got so much going on, whether it's with her career, her kids, her dealing with older parents or whatever, right? She's got a whole host of stress going on in her life. And you're adding all that to these, shifts of hormones. If we're not taking care of that nervous system, we're just continuing to pile on that stress and we haven't managed it.
That's right. And that is honestly over time, that's going to start to come out in the body. That's going to
Yep.
start to come out in some kind of physical illness, maybe mental health, depression, anxiety, maybe it's gut issues, maybe
Mhm.
even it's kind of this weight that we can't shift. Right? We're really trying to shift weights. We're
Mhm.
working out, we're eating, we're doing all the things, but still we can't shift this kind of middle weight, right?
Yep.
That is often this constant cortisol dump, right?
Yep.
So we're not if we're not regulating that, we're not setting ourselves up for success.
Right. Right. And and I know, so many women just feel like, well, Jen, I'm doing all the things, right? I'm eating the right things. I'm eating my protein. I'm lifting my weights. And still I just can't seem to lose that last 10, 20 pounds, or I've got all this. Why can't I get rid of this middle? And then you ask them, well, how are you managing your stress? Are you, are you doing something for your stress? Well, I don't have time for
Mm-hmm.
that, right? Whereas I wish they
Mm-hmm.
would start there because that's going to build the foundation, right?
Yeah, yeah. And often if you start to dig in, a lot of that stress is again created by some of these thoughts and these stories, like these have tos or the
Uh-huh.
scarcity
Hmm.
habit. Stress can be a habit. We can really
Yeah.
get addicted to these stress cycles. So it's really again, it's everything is important, but the emotional
Yeah.
fitness and that nervous system health, I mean, those are really vital.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And, you know, like I said, a lot of women will say, well, I just don't have time for that. But it doesn't have to take a long time.
Right. Right, right. Yeah. I mean, if you've got time for a cup of coffee in the morning, you've got
Hmm.
time to care for yourself in a more effective way.
Yeah.
If you've got time to, I hate to say it, scroll on Facebook, right? Do the doom
Yeah.
scrolling for 5 or 10 minutes, you've got time.
Right.
You've got time. And we're not talking about a lot of time. Literally, I like to think of it like how can we sprinkle a little bit more into the day? Maybe
Right.
something in the morning, maybe around
Hmm.
midday, maybe bedtime, right?
Yeah.
How can we just sprinkle a couple of these simple things into your day? Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's just it. It's how can you, you know, maybe before you get out of bed, you can do, you know, a minute or two. Maybe, you know, at lunchtime or, you know, sometime in the afternoon, you can just sit in your chair with, you know, your cup of tea and do some breathing
Mhm.
exercises. And again, we're not looking for, you know, an hour, right? We're just looking for,
Right.
and maybe at bedtime, in order to get you into a really relaxed state, when you get into bed, that's what you do. You know, you take some time to do some deep breathing and understanding that, you know, a lot of people, oh, that's so hokey or that's so, you know, woo woo or whatever, right? But it really isn't.
It's crucial and
Yeah.
it's so powerful. Today it's because of the science, right? We
Right.
can back a lot by actual science. We can look at brains, we can look at MRIs and fMRIs, and we can actually see in real time how a few breaths or some mindfulness or some visualization can really change the brain state. We can see that in real time, and so there's way more science behind it
Hmm.
than there has ever been.
Yeah.
So again, super important.
Yeah. And it has a direct effect on your hormones, which during midlife, your hormones are, you know, in a complete roller coaster. Well, if you want to help that roller coaster, you know, here. It's
Yeah,
not a pill,
absolutely.
it's this. Not that there's anything wrong, right, with you know, supplementing and all that, but this is a tool, right, that you have at
It is
your fingertips
absolutely.
that's
Mhm,
free that you can do without any
mhm.
training or you know, special things, right?
Right. I mean, it really is. I mean, we have our breath with us always 24/7 until we don't, and it's just, again, it's that setting
Yeah.
that intention to just take a few breaths or connect with that heart space and really kind of grounding into the body, getting some body awareness, just noticing that how that breath lands for you. Maybe it's the
Hmm.
in and out of the stomach or the rising and falling of the chest or the heat and the cool coming through the nostrils, right? And just
Hmm.
doing that for 1 or 2 minutes,
Yeah.
right? Can,
Yeah.
try it now. Don't take my word for it. Try it. Take a
Right.
minute. Just rest and just notice, your body and your nervous system coming down a few notches. And that's the magic right there. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that kind of goes back to the whole idea of a mindset shift, right? Because if you, in your mind, you think, like, what's that going to do, right? You need to change your mindset on that and understand that, no, this is helpful. And the second mindset shift is to say, I don't need an hour. I don't need 15 minutes. I need 2 to 5.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love those times and certain times of the day that are really powerful. And you've mentioned them already, that kind of early
Hmm.
morning from sleep to wake,
Hmm.
and then that evening time from
Yeah.
from wake to sleep. Those are really powerful times.
Right.
And I would add another time in the day, maybe it's
Hmm.
a lunch or before you go into a meeting or before you make a transition, right? If
Yeah.
you're a working woman and you have to transition home or right in those transition times, that's a really beautiful time to
Hmm.
even sit in the car for a minute or two
Yeah.
and just get some of that breath in and just
Hmm.
before you go into that next job, right, of housing kids or grandkids and
Yeah.
swirl of activity. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh,
yeah. I encourage people.
that's a great one. Yes. Yes. Now I know we will include in our show notes, you have a special nervous system health PDFs. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm an author and I love to do pocket guides. I love to be able to provide low cost, no cost resources for people. So I have a really cool hiking guide if women are interested in the hiking guide, that's free and a download. But I also did recently the 12 ways, a pocket guide, 12 ways to calm your nervous system.
Mhm.
And it's a simple read. I mean, literally, I don't know, 5 minutes again. No
Yeah.
time, but it
Right.
takes 5 minutes. But there's 12 tried and tested ways, right?
Mhm.
Strategies you can begin to kind of try and add into your life. And it
Mhm.
is really trying to see what fits for you, what resonates for you, what works for you. And I would imagine out of the 12, you could probably find 2 or 3 that you feel like, okay, that works for me. I feel comfortable with that. That's something I can do.
Right.
So it's free, no cost. I would
Yep.
encourage listeners to download that. And
Mhm.
obviously, let me know if you have any questions or if you need any guidance or if I can help in any way. But that's a great, great starting point.
Mhm. Yeah. And if our listeners are interested in connecting with you, where could they find you?
Yeah, so everything, all my work, resources, ability to connect is at katechampionauthor.com.
Mhm.
And then I'm on, the usual platforms, Facebook, Instagram. Living Big Mindfully is the podcast. You can access that through the website and also on podcast channels.
Okay.
And yeah, you can access the books and the guides through katechampionauthor.com.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, Kate, I appreciate your time today, and I thank you for taking the time to share so much with our listeners.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. And I just would encourage everybody just try to, that's my
Yes.
challenge to you. Just try to do things and just keep at it. Try it for a couple of weeks and see what you notice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you for listening to the Fit News podcast, and we will catch you next time.